Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar for June. We are going to get started in just a minute. We have Alyssa Vinson today. She is going to teach us about nature journaling. Just to give people a couple minutes to get back in, why don't you all give me in the chat your favorite plant? And we'll start in like 1 minute, 2 minutes. Excuse me. Becky, I don't see the chat come up. Oh, there we go. Hibiscus and firebush. I can't narrow it down. That's probably everybody's on this webinar's answer. Let's see how much we have here. Okay, well, it looks like we most people are in the room, so let's go ahead and start. My name is Jen Marvin. This is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program's Homeowner Webinar Series, a series given every third Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. I am the Florida Friendly for Home Landscape statewide coordinator, and today we have Alyssa Vinson presenting nature journaling. Your microphones have been muted. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box instead of in the chat box. We'll answer those questions about the content specifically after the presentation, but I believe Alyssa is going to give you some questions to answer during the webinar. So if you would type your answers to her questions in the chat, if that makes sense. So questions for her in the Q&A, answers from you in the chat box. And then please stick around to take our survey at the end. It just helps me to give you the kind of programming that you'd like. And on a related note, in November, we will have an Ask the Expert panel instead of a regular webinar. The questions should be submitted in advance. So if you will put those on your surveys in the comment section, I will start looking for my experts to answer your questions in November. A couple of announcements. Excuse me, our FFL Awards, Florida Friendly Landscaping Awards program is open for entry. We are looking for submissions from those of you with great Florida friendly yards, communities, or interesting before or after pictures, a lot of other categories as well. Please go to the floridafriendlylandscaping.com homepage and scroll down to the middle of the page, and you'll see the graphic for the awards. If you click on that, it shows you how to enter, what categories there are, and the deadline for submission is September 15th. Finally, we are also looking for participants for the fourth season of the award-winning series, Flip My Florida Yard. We have a different format this year. If you go to flipmyfloridayard.com, you can find out how to enter and see what the new format is. We're going to include homeowners much more than we have in the past 3 seasons. So please go there. And if you're interested, it's a pretty long application, but please fill it out. Everybody's got a chance. So let me introduce our speaker today. Alyssa Vinson is a horticulture extension agent in Manatee County. While not a Florida native, Alyssa has lived in Florida for almost 20 years, exploring Florida's wild places. She approaches her role as a horticulture agent from a background of ecological sciences and hopes to ignite a love of the natural world through gardening in her programs. Alyssa is a certified arborist. Her areas of expertise include ecology, mangrove coastline management, facilitation, and educational program development. Alyssa, please go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to offer this webinar today. I started doing these nature journaling programs in my county a few years ago, mainly just following the pandemic as a way to kind of re-engage individuals in my community with the natural world. And I found it to be a really a wonderful experience, not only for the folks who participated in the programs, but also for me. It's just a delightful kind of way to approach your observations. And when Jen approached me about the possibility of teaching nature journaling in this format, I thought, well, normally I break us out into 3 days. We meet in a natural area. We kind of go in depth on different kinds of traits of different plants and things like that. But what you're going to get today is kind of a condensed version of that. And I am going to ask for your engagement as we go. And so when I do ask for your engagement, just please respond in the chat so that it's easy for me to see. So we're going to start out just by kind of coming to a shared definition of what nature journaling is. I think that when we say the word nature journaling, some people think it's just kind of like fluffy diary writing, but other people may kind of understand that it's a way for us to use our firsthand observations to observe the world around us. It is really it's a tool for collecting observations, for collecting feeling, emotion, but it can also be a way to collect hard data. We can take measurements, calculations, and have some of that kind of quantitative data collection happening as we go about our journaling experience. It is also a creative outlet. In my role as an extension agent, I'm expected to write for different audiences and to be an engaging presenter, and to help people kind of connect. And people connect and understand things best through storytelling, I think. And as you approach nature journaling from different perspectives, you can use it as a creative outlet, as a way to engage individuals who may read that journal in the future, or maybe yourself as you go back and review it, through those stories that you're telling. Okay, so a nature journal can encompass any of these things. It can be your mode of creativity. It can be a tool for documenting your observations of the world around you, and it can be a tool for data collection. Now, when we use the term nature journaling, you might wonder, okay, well, I'm in a Florida-friendly landscaping webinar. Why am I talking about nature journaling? Nature's far out there. Nature's not in my landscape. Nature's not in my garden. But I think that we need to come to a better understanding of where we find ourselves existing in nature, right? The definition of nature is tricky. It's variable, dependent on your perspective and where you grew up and how you have previously engaged with the natural world. Does keeping a nature journal imply that you're collecting observations on something that's kind of outside of yourself or outside of the norm? And how do we place ourselves within this narrative? And so this is the first time I'm going to ask you to engage with me in the webinar. If you would put in the chat box, please, what do you consider to be nature? When you describe something as natural, when you say you're going to a natural area, when you talk about this thing that exists in nature, how do you define that? Okay. Outside. Okay. Plants, insects, animals, birds, weather. Good. Yep. Backyard. No people. Okay. Not man-made. Natural area. Everything. Outside. Okay. Living dynamic elements. Yeah. Okay. Living world. Good. Natural environment, outdoor life. Okay. Interesting. Somebody wrote chemical-free area. Plants have a lot of chemicals in them. Plants are full of chemicals. Okay. The entire world, including man-made, right? Plants, animals living as they are intended. That's interesting. Okay. Intention. Um, Setting an intention for a non-human animal or plant that's a difficult thing for us to do, right? Because we can't set ourselves out of ourselves and get inside the head, if you will, of a raccoon or anything that's non-human. Yeah, Walden Pond. Okay, good. So the kind of overarching theme I'm getting from our responses is the idea that nature is outside, right? It's outside. It's not kind of in our house. I would say that you can definitely bring nature into your home, and our homes are an extension of ourselves in our environment, right? It's a part of the built environment, but it's still part of the environment. But nature then, is this idea that it's outside of the built environment, and it includes living and non-living components of an ecosystem, right? And in some people said not developed, and so I think we could draw a distinction maybe between natural and wild, right? Like a wild place or an undisturbed area, right? So again, these definitions are kind of tricky, but for us, for our purposes today, talking about nature journaling, we're going to define nature just as something kind of um, outside of the human experience, right? So anything that kind of falls into this category, like outside of the typical human experience. So even your backyard, even your garden, right? Putting yourself in the mindset of a plant or a bee or a bird, anything like that. Okay. So we as humans, we really have been documenting nature since our earliest evolution, right? We can find um, carvings on bones, counting things. We can find flutes and whistles and carvings of animals and humans. Cave paintings are present, right? We have ancient mythology based on these attempts to understand and describe the natural world. The capacity of our human ancestors to experience something as violent and traumatic as a huge thunderstorm or a flood, a catastrophic flood, and then to try to make sense of that experience of humans in this broader environment, broader world. And how we create these mythos, these meanings, to describe what's happening around us. So we've always kind of relied on these observations. They're place-based, right? We associate them with a certain geographic region. Typically, when we're collecting these kinds of observations, we're not talking about a global view. We're talking about something that has a distinct geographic boundary. And they rely on personal observations, right? If I am an ancient human and I'm being hunted by a saber-toothed cat, saber-toothed cats are going to be scary, and I am going to draw them as scary and fearsome creatures when I paint them on my cave wall, right? I'm not going to draw, the love between a mother saber-toothed cat and her cub while they're cuddling or something like that, right? I'm going to write down my observations or document my observations from kind of a human perspective. Um, but we've always kind of existed in this realm where we are recognizing kind of our place within this broader environment, right? And only recently kind of in human history do we think about outside, right? We find ourselves outside of nature. We kind of pull ourselves out of the narrative and say, okay, as a human, I exist outside of this other over here, this nature over here. And I think one of the wonderful things about nature journaling and practicing observation in this way is that we can find that reconnection. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I would also, think about from a historical perspective, from a science perspective, we rely on firsthand accounts quite often for a broader understanding of our environment and changes in our environment. We rely on firsthand observations of plant species to determine the native nature of that plant, right? Is it native? Is it not native? How do we determine that? Part of it relies on, genomic testing now, but a lot of it relies on firsthand observations and collected specimens. And who was doing that? We had people who were journaling as they were traveling, like Bartram. We have the travels with Bartram. We have documents from explorers. We have from original colonists. And then, we have kind of naturalist observations leading to scientific discovery. And in fact, in some cases with authors like Rachel Carson, who was observing the natural world, writing about what she was seeing. She's a biologist. She was writing about what she was seeing, and ultimately her book Silent Spring really helped to spur the modern environmental movement as we know it, and eventually led to the passing of the Clean Air and the Clean Water Acts in the 1970s. So we have these documented observations of nature that are leading not only to scientific discovery, but also to societal change. So we're going to do a little activity now. I want you to please read this excerpt that is on the screen. And I want you to examine the language used and then just write in the chat box 1 or 2 words about how the author makes you feel. So this is a description, right? It's a description of a trail. This is someone observing a trail that they're walking on. And I want you to write down just in a couple of words how the author makes you feel. Hmm, good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of the words that I've seen come up for a lot of folks is peaceful, calm, energized, in the moment was written quite a few times. Grounded has shown up quite a few times. And I noticed there was one person who said they were having trouble seeing the text, so I'll read it just so that you can kind of get a feel for what everybody else is talking about. On foot, however, we continued up along the bank, feeling our way with a stick through the showery and foggy day, and climbing over the slippery logs in our path with as much pleasure and buoyancy as in brightest sunshine, scenting the fragrance of the pines and the wet clay under our feet, and cheered by the tones of invisible waterfalls, with visions of toadstools and wandering frogs and festoons of moss hanging from the spruce trees, and thrushes flitting silent under the leaves. Good. Yeah. So I love this. This is a poet, David Gutterson, who wrote about a hiking trip he took in the Pacific Northwest. And when you read this, right? So he's describing not only the fact that it's a showery and foggy day, there's slippery logs, there's dripping, festoons of moss, there's toadstools, frogs, you can smell the wet clay, right? So this is him fully describing in the moment what he's experiencing in this in this presence that he's in, where he's walking along this trail, right? And I agree. Somebody just wrote, it makes me want to go hiking. Yes. Every time I read Gutterson, every time I feel the urge to escape to the mountains, and I cannot. It puts you in a good puts you in a good headspace for sure. So I like to do this, to use this as an excerpt to show how the language that we choose when we're journaling can lend itself to a certain sense or emotion within the reader. And even if we're just writing for ourselves, we want to write in a way to evoke emotion. But we also know a lot about this environment based on the words that were used, right? So we know what the weather was like. We know that there's a lot of downed logs, right? There's slippery logs. There's pine. There are fungi. There's moss. There are spruce trees. There are thrushes, right? So we're describing some of the species that are present in this area. In my mind, I'm picturing kind of a canopied trail in the Pacific Northwest that's very wet with some, clay on the ground, maybe like a nice reddish brown clay, and just rocks and logs all covered in moss, right? But we know this based on kind of the language that was provided to us. So as we go about our own kind of nature journaling experience, we understand that we have this ability to evoke emotion. We can use it as a creative outlet, but we can also use it as a way to help us plan, help us prepare our gardens and our landscapes, and so we should think too not only about this creative method of writing down our observations, but other ways that we can also document some of the data that we are collecting in our observations. So data can be quantitative or qualitative, right? So we can describe or we can count. We can include in our nature journals things like leaf, seed, and flower pressings. And I'll talk again a little bit later about other ways to do that. We can even put graphs in there, right? We can have graphical representations of things, drawings or sketches. I love to draw. I am not good at drawing, but the idea that you just kind of get the basic shape of something down can really help you remember it. And it's almost better than a photograph sometimes, because I don't know about you, but this thing that I have is full of thousands and thousands of photos of plants. And I love to take photos of plants, but I don't often then go back if I don't know what the plant is and try to figure out what that plant is. And I forget that I have this really cool picture of this plant. But if I take time to draw it in a nature journal, then I'm going to be reminded I've taken time really to document that plant. And I'm going to, kind of be more present with that plant that I've chosen to document. We can collect quantitative data in our journals specific to gardening, right? We could set up a graphical representation, a table to collect data, right? Say that on, June 10th, I sowed some amaranth seeds at about 1/10 of an inch in my raised bed soil. And then I'm gonna go back out every day or a couple of days, and I'm gonna write down, okay, on June 20th, I saw seedlings sprouting. They were this tall, right? And I can track the rate of growth of my plants. I can see how many of them successfully germinated. I don't know about you all, but I am a sucker for the seed catalog, and I see all of those beautiful pictures in the seed catalog, and I buy about 30 packets of seed, and then you can, maybe put them in your drawer in your fridge and forget about them for 5 years. And at that point, it might be an interesting experiment to see how many of those seeds are still going to successfully germinate, right? You're rifling around down there. You say, oh, I totally forgot about this like white-fleshed cantaloupe that I had to have 6 years ago. Let me toss it out there and see what happens. You can also find information on rainfall data, right? So how much rain is falling. I'm sure because this is a Florida-friendly landscaping webinar, we have a lot of folks here that already have rain gauges in their landscape, or maybe you have rain barrels out there. and you have kind of a general understanding of how much rain is falling in your landscape, but maybe it's happening more in one area than another. Maybe you're seeing changes in how that rainfall is kind of isolated in certain parts. And so those are good things to observe and to document. When you go out to take your observations, writing down what the weather is like is really important, especially if you're documenting things like pests or disease or pollinators, right? The presence of insects and birds can be very highly weather dependent as well. Yep, somebody made a comment about FAWN, the Florida Agricultural Weather Network, is a great place to get a lot of data. And if you're in the Tampa Bay area, we have Tampa Bay Waterkeeper and the Tampa Bay Water Atlas. They have a lot of really good data as well that's publicly available. So we have we can do our quantitative data, but we can also include maybe watercolors, maybe sketches, poetry, inspirational quotes, short stories. Maybe it can serve as a bit of a diary, right? I was out there and I had this experience and it reminded me of this time when, right? And you can write that down in your journal as you go. This bottom left-hand photo, this person is way better at drawing plants than I am. The one up in the right-hand corner is more closely related to what would happen in my journal, I think. But you can really be as detailed or as kind of creative as you want to be in these in documenting what you see. From a poetry perspective, if this is something that you kind of lean towards, I just have a few up here that I want to share. Shel Silverstein is a favorite in my household. My kids and I read Shel Silverstein at least twice a week. We have several of the poems memorized, but this Poet's Tree, I chose a few poems related to trees, and I'm going to give you just about, I don't know, a minute or so just to read these and think about the influence of plants on literature. I teach a whole class on trees and their influence on human culture. And this specifically, I really wanted to share this with you. Think about the way that plants influence our writing. So go ahead and take about a minute. And then just to inspire you a little bit more, I'm going to share just a couple of quotes on the next slide that are actually written in my nature journal. So these are quotes that inspire me when I am going out and spending time in the present and observing the natural world. The rest of the present, I kind of wanted to lay some of this foundation for us as we move forward. I'm going to give you some more kind of specific information, but um, If you didn't know, Emily Dickinson was an avid gardener, and throughout her poetry, she uses flowers as symbolism, and really weaves the nature and gardening into almost all of her poetry. So I encourage you, if if it's been since like high school English class that you haven't read Emily Dickinson, I encourage you to reach for some of her work. I find her very inspiring in a gardening kind of setting. And then I honestly, Rachel Carson is one of my hands down idols for many reasons, but one of the reasons is she actually is the reason I love Florida. I did not love Florida when I first moved here. I thought, gosh, this place is so flat. There's nothing here that I really, I came from living and working in Alaska and Oregon with big mountains, and I was like, what is this place isn't beautiful. But then I read her book, The Edge of the Sea. And she really celebrates the slow energy estuary systems, the Gulf Coast, the sand, and it really changed how I perceived Florida. And that makes me think of this Proust uh, quote, which is that the real voyage of discovery consists not of seeing new landscapes, but in having new eyes, right? So a lot of nature journaling, a lot of the art of practicing nature journaling is about mindfulness, being present in the moment, and a shift in your perspective, right? We spend a lot of time in and around our landscapes, but we may not sit in front of one bush and count all 37 different insects that we see. That might not be a daily activity. But I think that shifting that perspective a little bit, and that practice of nature journaling can really improve that ability and that process. And along with that, thinking about nature journaling as a practice of mindfulness, many of the same human health benefits we see from mindfulness and meditation also are associated with nature journaling. So, we have decreased stress. We have, the just the reduction in overall kind of stress symptoms, reduction in depression symptoms. All of those things are associated with the practice of mindfulness. We also, I don't know if you've seen, I know Mark Frank does a really good presentation on green blindness or plant blindness, this concept that, we don't really see the natural world, and when we do see it, we have trouble as humans kind of picking out distinctions among the different species. And so this practice of observation really kind of keys us into those differences and allows us to start to kind of cure that green blindness, that plant blindness a little bit. It sharpens our observational skills, right? And flexing those creative muscles a little bit really is good for our brains, especially as we age. It allows us to kind of encourage some technical expertise in creative folks and some creativity in more technical folks, right? Some people are really good at that quantitative data collection, but they've never written a poem before. Some people are poets, and they've never measured a plant as it grew, right? So the act of kind of engaging in nature journaling practices can kind of engage those different aspects of ourself and encourage, more expertise, or at least more joy in some of those different realms of our being. Um, it also allows us to plan for our future gardens. We're taking seasonal observations, right? We're writing down information about specific varieties or cultivars of plants. We can document what our planting media was like, right? So, say I'm starting a new gardening project. I'm gonna say, okay, I had a third sand, a third perlite, and a third compost in these containers, and I'm trying these plants. And then you write down your observations about those plants. And you can kind of document, okay, I decided to shift it a little bit and I switched to this kind of planting media. And then you can have a way to kind of monitor as you go. Thinking about things like companion planting, right? So put some plants next to each other, see how they do one season. Next season, put some different plants next to each other. See if those plants get along, you know? You can build in kind of calendar reminders for yourself as well. So, I've lived in my house for almost 10 years now, and one of the things that I sought to do when I first moved in was to actively kind of build rich soil for my garden spaces. And I do that through, composting and all the good things that we teach through Florida Friendly Landscaping. But I have kind of seasonal things that I'll do. I'll do a cover crop. I'll do solarization, and then I'll do some composting. But I have kind of times of the year when I want to do those things, and having a nature journal, having a garden journal allows me to kind of build those reminders in. And then I really, we get a lot of questions about vegetables and herbs here at the extension office, especially tomatoes. People really want to know how to grow tomatoes, and I think it's because they can't like find a really tasty tomato like they could in, Indiana or New Jersey or something like that. And so when we are putting so much of ourselves, so much of our time and effort into growing things that we might consume, I want to write down, how does it taste? If I'm biting into that cherry tomato, is it acidic? Is it sweet? Does it have umami? What is the color like? Is it dark red? Is it vibrant cherry red? What did it smell like? Did it have hints of, cantaloupe? But writing down all of these observations also helps us feel more enjoyment in the moment when we get to experience those things that we've spent so much time on. We can also use nature journaling as an integrated pest management tool. One of our goals of Florida Friendly Landscaping is to manage our pests responsibly, right? And so, in order to first be able to manage our pests, we have to identify what they are, and taking down observations on what time of year certain pests are appearing. What do they look like? Maybe I don't know what they are and I need to ID them, right? So looking at that, the date of arrival, and maybe in some cases, if you have, let's say you've got a milkweed in your yard, and it gets lovely little milkweed aphids on it, wait, just wait like 1 week, 2 weeks, and see if you have any predators arrive, right? So document the presence of beneficial insects in your landscape. If you can do more then to encourage those beneficial insects, then you can take down, observations about whether you see more lacewing larvae under your leaves, or more lacewing eggs, or, what have you. And if you're using different control methods, if you need to use some horticultural oils or soaps, or neem or BT, or what have you, you can then, document the effectiveness of those control methods, and it can serve as a reminder for you to rotate your modes of action. If you are in a situation where you need to use insecticides, you can then have a document say, okay, on this day, I was looking for this, I saw this, I used this insecticide. A month later, I have this problem. I'm gonna switch my mode of action. I'm gonna go to something different and see how effective that is. Okay. So nature journaling doesn't have to just be kind of fluffy poetry, observations, meditation, right? It is those things, but it is also a really great tool for us as we plan and manage our gardens and our landscapes. So how do you get started if you've never done nature journaling before? It's really easy. You can get a notebook. I'm gonna grab my notebook. You can grab a notebook. I have so many notebooks. I'm terrible at this. I'm one of those people where I'm like, ooh, what is this, heavyweight paper? Is it medium weight paper? What kind of pen am I gonna use? And then I end up buying like 10 notebooks, and they're sitting all over the place. But get a notebook that you're comfortable with. I recommend notebooks that have pockets in the covers. That way you can slip in piece like leaves and things like that if you want to go back and do pressings. Find something that's a lay flat notebook as well. Those are really nice and convenient. You can set them down, you can scrunch down, you can get comfortable on the grass, you can hunch over, lean over them, and do your writing and your drawing. Pencil, pen, watercolors, charcoals, you know, your instrument of choice. I would say pencil would be good when you're writing down observations and documenting kind of quantitative data. That way you can erase if you need to. But a pen, I find pens, especially like a nice smooth gel ink pen, to be more conducive to things like creative writing. So if I'm going to go in and my goal today is to observe the garden and then to write a poem, right? Then I'm going to use like a gel kind of pen to do that kind of writing. It's good to have a ruler. Not only for you know, if you're doing some specific measurements, but if you find something interesting, then you can get an idea of its scale. If you're going to take photos, which you can do, you can take photos. You could print them out. You can put them in your nature journal. Maybe you're going to try to do your nature journaling on like a tablet device, and you can do. They have the e-ink screens, and you can write with a stylus on the screen, and you could take a photo, right? So if you are taking photos, use a coin or something similar for scale so that you have a good idea of what you're looking at. And then remember to identify surrounding characteristics such as habitat, weather, those types of things in your notes. It can be very important to know what time of day you're looking at something. Some plants flower in the morning and close up in the evening, etc. So you want to know kind of what time of day it was, what's the surrounding habitat type, especially if you're going out into what we would call kind of like an undisturbed area or a conservation area. Recognizing whether you're in you know, a mesic hammock or a xeric flatwoods is probably a good idea. And if you're interested in more of that kind of terminology, there are a lot of resources available. Learn how to describe what you're seeing with the language of science. And this is important, especially if you're trying to correctly identify plants and pests, right? You want to be able to describe things in a way that will help you as you search out and try to identify what you're looking at. Um, you know, as I think when I was looking through the participant list, I think I recognized a few learners on the call. So you all have had this kind of training through your botany training. But for the general public as well, there's a lot of good resources out there. But learn, you know, what is the leaf margin? What kind of words can describe the leaf margin? What is the overall form of the plant? What kind of flower shape are you looking at? For insects, just kind of be familiar with major families and their general ecological role. Are you looking at a pollinator? Are you looking at a predator? Are you looking at something that only eats aphids or mealybugs, or are you looking at something that's a general predator? Are you really looking at an insect, or are you looking at maybe an arachnid, right? Insects have 6 legs and arachnids have 8. So kind of being able to describe with kind of the language of science can help you there. You know, some words to describe form. Think about whether they're sprawling, whether they're upright. Are they herbaceous, meaning, you know, lots of leaves? They have kind of springy stems. Are they prostrate, growing across the ground, or are they more shrub-like, maybe with woody stems? What is the distance between the nodes? Can you find the nodes on the stem, right? The node is where the new leaves and buds emerge. What is the stem rigidity like? Are flowers present? Is it something that you can't see flowers on, or you don't know if it flowers? Think about all of these different words you can use to describe the form of the plant you're looking at. Specific to trees, some other characteristics to consider are bark, and that bark, the texture of the bark, the color of the bark, how the bark fractures is going to be important for tree identification. Leaf shape, does it have flowers? Does it have fruit? These are all things that you want to consider and to write down. For trees, it can be really beneficial to do a bark or leaf rubbing or both. You can use crayon, chalk, or a shading pencil to do either of these things. For a bark rubbing, you're going to take your paper and you're going to lay it on the bark, and you're going to gently kind of draw across the top of it to get the impression of the bark. And with leaves, you can pick a leaf, lay it on a flat surface, lay your paper on top, and go over it with a crayon or chalk or shading pencil. I like crayon. Crayon lasts and it's colorful and it's fun, and you can do it with kids. And you want the paper to be lightweight but sturdy to avoid tearing. So don't get like the newsprint paper for this. It should, copy paper honestly works pretty well. You can also press leaves and flowers. You want to place them between sheets of newspaper and then sandwich between two very heavy books. So think like, two Encyclopedia Britannicas, sandwiching those plants between a few sheets of newspaper, or you can buy a plant press like you see in the image here, or you can make your own with some sturdy pieces of dense cardboard and a belt or a couple of straps, something like that. You can also find some online that are cheap. So I definitely recommend if you want to do leaf pressings and flower pressings, you can find them or buy them uh, or build them yourself. Also, something we did recently in Manatee County that was really fun, you can do flower pounding, which is a kind of a fun kind of art you can do where you lay the flowers down and you use like a tea cloth and you put that on top of the flower and you actually hammer the flower and you get the impression of the flower with the actual ink or the the color pigments from the flower are on the cloth. So that might be another option too if you wanted to incorporate something like that. And then I'm going to take just a second because I love botanical names. I think they are absolutely fascinating and they tell us a lot about the plant and about the history of the plant and about where that plant came from. And so I'm going to take this right here, which is Helianthus debilis. Okay, and Helianthus, it's actually not in this copy. There's a really fabulous book that I use. I keep it on my desk. I have the what do I have here? I have the 1947 edition on my desk, but you can get new versions of it. But for Helianthus, right? So the word Helianthus comes from the Greek helios, the sun, and anthos, flower, sunflower, right? So Helianthos. And then when we look at, kind of down to that species level, when they don't actually have Debilis in this version, but they have uh, Giganteus, right? That one makes sense. So Helianthus sunflower, giant sunflower. Multiflorous, many flowered. Sparsifolious, where the leaves are spread out or far apart, right? Tomentosus, felted. So if it's Helianthus tomentosus, it would have felted leaves. We can use the plant names to learn things about the plants. Now, there's also sometimes you'll run into things like Haworthia. Haworthia, A.H. Haworth, an English botanist and writer on succulent plants. And those are greenhouse succulents, right? So some of the genus names and species names are associated with specific traits of the plant, and some of them you get to learn some interesting history about the plant. So when you find those botanical names, write them down, maybe add a little bit about that history, add a little bit about the etymology of the word. Where does it come from? Is there any kind of mythology or folklore associated with that name of that plant? And I wanted to kind of just end by saying I understand that this is a Florida-friendly landscaping webinar, and I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to kind of participate in this forum. And I think that when I was thinking about how is nature journaling connected to Florida-friendly landscaping, the first thing is that keen observation is a cornerstone of all of the FFL principles. So all 9 of the FFL principles relate in some way to being acutely aware of what's going on in your landscape, right? At its very basic, FFL is all about protecting our water from a conservation and quality perspective, but more importantly, it's about engaging in the management and maintenance of your landscape in a way that protects our broader environment, right? And so that keen observation is a cornerstone of the FFL program and the FFL principles. Selecting right plant for the right place, right? You can't begin to select that right plant until you know the site conditions, until you've spent time observing where does the sun travel in my landscape? How much light is happening here? What does the soil feel like? Where does the rain fall? Right? These are all aspects that you have to incorporate into selecting the right plant for the right place. Managing your pests, encouraging wildlife, protecting water quality, all stem from observation and thoughtful planning. And really the principles both inform our observations, right? If we're already engaged with the Florida friendly landscaping principles in our landscape, then that's going to inform kind of the lens through which we look at our landscape. But we are also taking cues from our observations, from our ability to observe our environment, to recognize its connection to the broader environment, which really is kind of the motivation behind FFL, right? We recognize that connection to our broader environment within our home landscape, and we want to do something, to make it better. And so that's how I feel that the practice of nature journaling can kind of connect with Florida friendly landscaping. And uh, I'm gonna ask you for one last bit. So we're at 11:50 here, and so this very last slide. These are two photos that I took. One of them is in the extension demonstration garden, and one of them is out in a natural area. But I would like to end just with a practice where you pick one of these images, and then I'll give you just a minute or two to kind of think about it. You don't have to share, but this is for your own practice. Draw, describe, how does it make you feel? This is your opportunity to kind of practice some of the things that we talked about. Okay, I'll put in the chat box. All right. Yes, you should read The Edge of the Sea. It's a great book. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I do have a couple references if you're interested in learning more, reach out to me, and I look forward to talking to some of you via email.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. That was fantastic. Makes me want to go home and draw. Um, we had one question. Now it's like getting buried in the comments here. I think you've referenced the plant book.
Yep.
So that one's done. And then also, do you offer your full class online, or do people outside to people outside your community?
Yeah, so I don't do it online, mainly because I really like taking people out into the garden and having the experience of, being in that space together. But I will consider, I would be open to people from outside the county if they wanted to join, for sure. I don't have one on the calendar yet. For this year, I usually try to do it when it's a little bit nicer outside. But if you reach out to me a little later in the year, and I might have something that you could join.
Okay. If you do, let me know and we'll pass it on
Okay.
to the listeners here. Um, So I don't see any other questions. Let's see. How do we connect with you and hear about the classes? Just
Here, yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say I put my email in, and I would be so remiss if I did not mention that I also have a podcast. And so if you
Oh,
liked listening to me today, I actually co-host the podcast with Dr. Taylor Clem, who is
great.
a horticulture agent and county extension director in Nassau County. And our podcast is called Cultivating Curiosity, and it is available on all podcast platforms. So I'll type Cultivating Curiosity. I don't have the link handy, and I am wagging my finger at myself for that. But Cultivating Curiosity is the name of the podcast.
And you can find it on Apple
Yep.
and on any platform.
Yep.
So it's great. It's a great one. Thank you so much, Alyssa.
Thank
I don't
you.
see any other questions. This has been really fun. Kind of a different webinar than we usually have. So I appreciate, oh, there it is. There's the link, you guys, in the
Oh,
chat.
yay. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, listen to Alyssa's podcast. It's with Dr. Hansen and Taylor Clem. And I know most of you know who Dr. Hansen is. She's our design guru. So thank you very much, Alyssa, again. And I hope everybody has a great week. And we will be back next month. Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.